Hello, we are back with part two of our week one video interview session in creating social media presence and cultural movements. Dr. Casberry here, joined by Mr. Michael Bergen, a specialist in areas of wildlife conservation in the state of Oklahoma, as well as farming, right, and small business entrepreneurship. And we are taking questions from our students, and we will continue to learn more about Mr. Bergen and his expertise, as well as what he can offer us in the way of synthesizing key takeaways from this course, but even others that we've tackled. So again, thank you for joining us. We've got a question from student Ezel, and I'll let him take it away.
Hello, Mr. Bergen. Welcome to our class this week as I interview you. I have two questions I'd like to ask you. But first of all, I would like to say that in this first week we were talking about passion. But at church, our pastor preached more on something called purpose. So my first question is, I want to ask you, after making wildlife and outdoor life a profession, do you feel that this was your purpose, or this is something that you knew that you wanted to do growing up in life? Did you know that you wanted to make the occupation that you're in today a profession?
All right, so question about purpose, like that, and when how maybe it's a question even of how you got to where you are, or where this may connect to your personal interests.
Yeah, very good question. Because I think obviously everyone is kind of everybody's looking for a purpose to pursue, like in their career, and they want something deeper than just the place they go to make their money. And we all want that, and some people get that, some people don't. Depending on where you're at in life, that can really play a role in how happy you are. Some people are content to go to work and earn their money, and then do their passions and pursuits outside of that. Others, like he's telling us here, are looking for something that they can deeply root into and make their purpose. For me, growing up, I always loved to hunt and fish. First of all, that's how it started. I was just a kid who loved to hunt and fish. I didn't know much, and I also, believe it or not, at the time growing up, loved writing. And so I always did kind of say, I want to write about hunting and fishing. I want to write about one of my passions. I want to be I think I targeted the field of freelance writing initially is how I said how I'm gonna pursue my career, and it was all about just a passion. Probably not even a purpose at that time. It was more about, this is my passion. I want to talk about hunting and fishing to others. Didn't even really care probably much about educating and teaching and engaging sportsmen. That evolved over time as I learned about what conservation is. And I learned about my role as a sportsman to conservation, and the inherent value and the intrinsic value of just knowing there's wildlife out there on the landscape. That became a passion for me. That became a deeper interest for me as I learned that myself in my career as a specialist at the Wildlife Department. When I first came on board at the Wildlife Department, I was the editor of our magazine, Outdoor Oklahoma. Long-standing magazine, and I wrote news releases for the agency. It's always centered around writing, but in college I didn't even know that this was an opportunity for me.
Let me pause you right there. I just want to make a point of clarification that really drives home something, and I'm not going to try to cheat this too much, but are you suggesting that your role or roles when working for not only a magazine but also the website intersect more than one areas? Because when I hear the word press release, I think of public relations. When I hear about website, content creation, I'm thinking about social media strategist. When I hear about freelancing and journalism, I'm thinking of traditional mass communication. So you're suggesting the contemporary market blends these areas of interest
heavily, and if you're not doing that, you're probably missing something somewhere. As a well-rounded communications shop. Now, where I work, luckily we do have essentially a full marketing and PR and communication shop. We have TV guys, we have writers, we have specialists in social media, we have specialists in education, we have a webmaster. And all of these things come together, and we're always working together on these things. And sometimes, you hope that always your left hand knows what your right hand is doing, but sometimes it doesn't work that way. But that's where, even communication among coworkers matters too, and how we're communicating our messages to the public. But yes, heavily blended.
Well, my left hand tries to keep secrets from my right hand. That's my biggest problem.
Right.
Let's take another question from a different student. Will that work?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Well, I guess we'll leave Ezel hanging for now, and we'll see if we have time to.
Great question.
All right.
My name is Kimberly DeLorge, and for this COM 4603 video discussion for the first week of this class, one of my first interview questions for our interviewee would be, what do you hope to achieve for working for Wildlife Resources? Kind of when you were starting out in your career, and then now as you're continuing it, kind of what are your goals that you're looking forward to?
Okay, that's a great question. And it certainly helps to have some goals, both personal and also goals that your superiors have given you.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to take into account and blend both, and don't try and let those be abrasive to each other. See where your personal goals can match up with the organization or your direct boss who you work for, because obviously that's how you're going to keep your job.
So maybe a personal goal. So
Right.
say you set personal goals in an informal setting in your mind, then it's important to be active and forward, like to try to bring these to light, right? Present them to people. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think that's possible. I think it also depends on the culture of the group you go to work for.
Mm-hmm.
When I was hired on at the Wildlife Department to be basically a journalism and publication specialist, writing news releases and editing our magazine, my job was and my boss even told me, he said, I want you to always help me know what's right about what we should publish in written form. So as a magazine editor, that was the role I played as a specialist. It was my job to resist where necessary, or to go with the flow where necessary, to where we were always producing excellence in our publications.
This sounds like you're talking about media ethics.
Sure, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of that there.
And the importance of, it's not just say fact checking, but checking accountability in the workplace.
Yeah.
Accountability
Sure.
when we're putting information out there.
Yeah,
All right.
fact checking. It's kind of interesting because the Wildlife Department, our communication group, is obviously going to have bias. We are a biased organization. We believe in hunting and fishing as the method for conservation. But at the same time, as the government agency, we have to tell the truth about what's happening in wildlife and within our agency and what hunting and fishing does to conservation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, when you are a state agency accountable to the public, but you're also a state agency that believes in your pathway toward your end goal. You are blending the two, and you are as a communication specialist, you're always going to be biased for your organization, but at the same time, you're accountable to the public.
Okay.
So there's significant ethics there.
Yeah. Very nice, very nice. Let's see. We're on a roll here.
And then, as per Dr. Castleberry asking me to submit a second question, my second question would then be, what advice would you give someone coming into your field today? What would you kind of tell them? What would you kind of urge them to do or not to do? This one's kind of an open-ended question, so any advice that you could give someone that'd be brand new, we'd love to hear it.
We love open-ended questions. So advice for up-and-comers.
Yeah.
What do we need to do? How do we get there? Isn't that one of the largest hurdles?
It's one of the largest hurdles, and I think that the answer is flexibility. And that sounds so cliche, but let me explain a little bit and give an example of what I mean. When I was hired on, my first job out of college, I was a newspaper reporter. I wrote the news,
Mm-hmm.
and my job was to be unbiased. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To take community news and present it to the public.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, I'm working for a publishing company, and I have to represent the the beliefs of that company, and every writer that you worked with had to basically kind of follow certain principles because the company was putting money into that writer and things. And then now I work for an agency that has basically a public relations shop, again,
Mm-hmm.
needing to have some bias, not just bias in the way you communicate, but also I would say flexibility in what you do. When I came on at the Wildlife Department, I wrote magazine articles, news releases. I was an editor. But the reality was I was a communicator for the department. And if I went in saying I'm only a writer, I'm only a magazine editor, my career would have struggled there, because one day, in the last 12 years that I've been there, we got a Facebook account.
Mm-hmm.
And no longer was it as hypercritical that we, produce content every 2 months in a magazine, but we needed to be communicating every day. So, I had to basically have an attitude of, even though my dream has always been to be a magazine editor, it's okay if that evolves into a social media professional. It's different, but it's still the same set of skills, and it's still the same end goal of communicating to the public about hunting and fishing. But I had to be flexible there. If I was, if I let it just break my heart and hurt me that I'm no longer the magazine editor, that we've evolved and created the need for these other positions, I would struggle. So flexibility, both in what you're going to do, and in being able to say, okay, these skills still apply. It's still like, no matter which way we slice it, I'm a communicator.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my job.
All right. What I feel like I'm hearing is the world needs editors, all right, especially if you're on Twitter. We are going to take another
Right. quick
quick break, and we're going to be back with more awesome, remarkable student interview questions. All right.